What if I told you that some of the biggest hits in pop and rock aren't as original as you think? From the 1960s rock to the 1990s pop, we'll reveal the true origins of certain hits, confirmed cases of musical plagiarism that will make you question everything you thought you knew about music history. In the music world, the line between inspiration and plagiarism is sometimes very thin. Time and again, famous artists have been accused of copying melodies or lyrics from lesser-known musicians. In fact, cases of musical plagiarism happen more often than it seems. Often, the public only discovers years later that a favorite song was almost a clone of another that already existed. In the 1960s, rock and roll was exploding with creativity, but it also produced some of the earliest plagiarism scandals. Let's start with the Beach Boys. In 1963, they released Surfin' USA, which became a surfing culture anthem and the band's first big hit.
Everybody's gone surfing, surfing USA.
However, it didn't take long for people to notice its strong resemblance to Chuck Berry's Sweet Little 16 from 1958.
Oh, Daddy, Daddy, I beg of you. You see them wearing their baggies, Warachi sandals too.
The melody was nearly identical. Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys leader, openly admitted he was inspired by Berry's song. Chuck Berry appreciated the tribute at first, but he wasn't about to give up his rights. He demanded his share of songwriting credit and royalties. Facing a potential lawsuit, the Wilson brothers' father, who was also the band's manager, quickly added Chuck Berry as a co-author of Surfin' USA, without even telling Brian Wilson. In the end, Berry got a writing credit, even a portion of the lyrics credit, despite the words being Brian's, and received due payment for the Beach Boys' borrowing. Also in the 60s, even the Beatles found themselves in a plagiarism controversy. In 1969, John Lennon wrote "Come Together," an iconic track from the Abbey Road album.
Here come old flat top, here come grooving up slowly.
But the opening line, "Here Come Old Flat Top," and the groove were very reminiscent of Chuck Berry's 1956 rock tune, "You Can't Catch Me."
Yeah, come on, flat top. He was moving up with me, then come waving good.
The result? Chuck Berry's publisher sued Lennon for copyright infringement. Lennon more or less acknowledged that "Come Together" was built on a Chuck Berry thing. He said, "I left the line 'Here comes old flat top' from Chuck Berry." To avoid a lengthy court battle, an out-of-court settlement was reached. Lennon agreed to record a few songs from Berry's publisher, Morris Levy's catalog, on a future album, as a form of compensation. Thus, the case was closed without tarnishing the Beatles' reputation. But the lesson stands. Even the Fab Four borrowed someone else's riff and almost paid a high price for it. If the 60s had their incidents, the 1970s saw major plagiarism battles erupt in the music world. One of the most emblematic examples involves George Harrison. In 1970, he released his solo hit, "My Sweet Lord." A beautiful song with a gospel vibe. It didn't take long for people to notice its similarity to "He's So Fine," a 1963 song by the girl group The Chiffons. The melodies and the choruses were almost identical. The publisher of "He's So Fine" sued Harrison in 1971, taking the case to court. After hearing testimony and even musicologists, the verdict was unusual. The judge ruled that Harrison had committed subconscious plagiarism. In other words, he hadn't copied on purpose, but he still copied unintentionally. So similar were the songs. Harrison was ordered to compensate the owners of "He's So Fine."
I was requested to go and take my guitar, which was really terrible. I had to stand up in court with my guitar. So all these people grilling me and talk about how you write a song, which is really difficult because every song is slightly different anyway.
Negotiations over the amount dragged on for years in a complex legal saga, with the Beatles' former manager even meddling at one point. Fed up, Harrison made a drastic decision in 1981. He bought the rights to "He's So Fine" himself for over $500,000, settling the matter once and for all. Another huge 70s band marked by plagiarism controversies was Led Zeppelin. The British rockers loved to drink from the well of blues and folk, sometimes without giving much credit to the original sources. A famous case, "Whole Lotta Love," released in 1969. This anthem of hard rock borrowed lyrics almost directly from Willie Dixon's "You Need Love." a blues song Dixon wrote for Muddy Waters in 1962.
Woman, you need love. Woman, you need love.
Initially, Dixon wasn't credited on Whole Lotta Love. A decade and a half later, in 1985, Willie Dixon sued Led Zeppelin for lifting his lyrics. The outcome? The band settled, paid Dixon, and added him to the songwriting credits on subsequent releases of the album. Today, if you check the credits for Whole Lotta Love, you'll see Willie Dixon's name alongside the members of Led Zeppelin. Proof of plagiarism that was acknowledged and rectified, even if belatedly. And it didn't stop there. Led Zeppelin had multiple issues like this. Many bluesmen saw their songs reimagined by Led Zeppelin without permission. For example, Dazed and Confused was almost a replica of a track by obscure folk rock singer Jake Holmes, who eventually sought credit decades later.
I'm dazed and confused, hanging on by a thread.
I've been dazed and confused, so long as not true.
Even Stairway to Heaven faced a famous plagiarism accusation regarding the instrumental Taurus by the band Spirit. Though in that case, a jury in 2016 decided in Led Zeppelin's favor, finding no infringement. So not every accusation ends in a conviction. But the reputation stuck. Led Zeppelin, despite their genius, borrowed quite a bit from earlier artists. So much so that Jimmy Page and co. ended up in several legal settlements to fix the credits of their songs. Finally, closing out the 70s with a bang, or rather with a lawsuit, we have Rod Stewart. In 1978, he scored a huge disco-pop hit with "Do Ya Think I'm Sexy?", which filled dance floors worldwide. However, the song's main melody, especially the famous chorus, was not 100% original. It's practically identical to the melody of Taj Mahal, a track by Brazilian artist Jorge Ben-Jor, released in 1972. When Jorge Ben realized his riff had found its way into Rod Stewart's song, he didn't let it slide. He filed a plagiarism lawsuit.
I'd just come back from Brazil, from the festival there, and this song was on my mind. And then a few months later, I went into the studio and started singing that melody, and I wrote the lyrics.
The case was resolved in a rather amicable way. Rod Stewart admitted that yes, he had unintentionally plagiarized Taj Mahal. As restitution, Stewart agreed to donate all royalties from "Do Ya Think I'm Sexy?" to UNICEF instead of paying Jorge Ben directly. This clever solution ended up making Stewart look good, coming off as charitable, and satisfied Jorge Ben, who accepted the deal. In addition, Ben-Jor has received songwriting royalties for both his song and Stewart's song since then. It was an unusual resolution. The hit's money went to charity, but the whole world learned that the catchy chorus was, in fact, made in Brazil. Moving into the 1980s, the era of synth pop and moonwalks, we also find cases of plagiarism, proving that even the pop charts weren't immune to musical borrowing. A notorious example involves one of the most famous movie theme songs, the Ghostbusters theme.
There's something strange in your neighborhood.
In 1984, Ray Parker Jr. composed the infectious Ghostbusters, Who You Gonna Call, for the film Ghostbusters. The song was a smash hit, but it quickly drew attention for sounding similar to I Want a New Drug, a 1983 hit by Huey Lewis and the News.
I want a new drug, one that does what it should.
The riff and funky beat were very much alike. The outcome: Huey Lewis sued Ray Parker Jr. for plagiarism, alleging that Parker basically lifted the melody and bass line from I Want a New Drug. The case never went to a public trial. An out-of-court settlement was reached, with Parker and the movie studio paying an undisclosed sum to Huey Lewis, and all parties agreeing not to discuss the details. Years later, Huey Lewis mentioned the dispute in an interview, violating the confidentiality agreement, and Parker in turn sued him for speaking out. A whole saga. But the main fact is, yes, it was officially acknowledged that the Ghostbusters theme was based on Huey Lewis's song. Another 80s music legend entangled in a plagiarism controversy was none other than Michael Jackson. The king of pop had a small but notable déjà vu in one of his tracks. The song Wanna Be Startin' Something, which opens the Thriller album, 1982. features an unforgettable chant, Mama say, Mama sa, Mama cosa. That catchy line actually came straight from a 1972 hit called Soul Makossa by Cameroonian musician Manu Dibango. Jackson used Dibango's hook without credit. When Manu Dibango found out, he sued Michael Jackson for plagiarism in 1984. The issue was quickly resolved with an amicable out-of-court settlement. MJ paid Dibango a compensation and they moved on. However, years later, in 2007, the story resurfaced. Pop star Rihanna sampled Wanna Be Startin' Something in her song Don't Stop the Music, specifically the Mama Say Mama Sa part. And Dibango sued again, arguing he hadn't authorized this new usage. This time, a court ruled that Rihanna's label had to add Dibango's name as a songwriter on her track. Rihanna eventually purchased the rights to that chant to put the matter to rest. In the end, that infectious African refrain led to two separate legal battles. To cap off the 80s, it's worth mentioning a case that actually falls at the start of the 90s, but which perfectly illustrates our theme. Vanilla Ice, one of the early mainstream rap pop stars. In 1990, he topped the charts with Ice Ice Baby. There was just one problem. That distinctive bass line of the song was not his invention. It was, in fact, identical to the riff from Under Pressure, the 1981 classic by Queen and David Bowie. Vanilla Ice initially released Ice Ice Baby, without giving any credit to Bowie or Queen. Naturally, Queen and Bowie's camp didn't appreciate that. They sued Vanilla Ice for using that unmistakable bass riff without permission. The rapper famously tried to argue that his beat was slightly different. He even joked that he added an extra little note. But honestly, it was the same. In the end, he chose not to fight it out in court. A legal settlement was reached wherein Vanilla Ice paid a sum and officially added Freddie Mercury, Brian May, Roger Taylor, John Deacon of Queen, and David Bowie as co-writers of Ice Ice Baby. It's been said that Vanilla Ice later went so far as to purchase the rights to Under Pressure outright. But regardless, the copy was so blatant that the credits had to be fixed by force. This case is emblematic. A hip-hop one-hit wonder ended up financially thanking the rock legends he had copied. Finally, we arrive in the 1990s, a decade when alternative rock, Britpop, and radio pop reigned, and musical plagiarism continued to rear its head, or should we say, ears. One famous example involves the British band Radiohead, and interestingly, a band from the 70s. In 1992, Radiohead released Creep, their debut single, which became an anthem of the 90s with its anguished chorus,
But I'm a creep.
However, the chord progression and part of the melody in Creep weren't entirely new. They sounded quite similar to those in the ballad The Air That I Breathe, a 1974 hit by the Hollies.
No cigarettes, no sleep, no light.
The writers of The Air That I Breathe, Albert Hammond and Mike Hazelwood, noticed the resemblance and contacted Radiohead's publisher. The members of Radiohead ended up admitting that indeed, they had been inspired by the Hollies song and that the similarities weren't purely coincidental. Rather than fight, the band quickly agreed to give the veteran songwriters their due. Hammond and Hazelwood were added as co-writers of Creep, and they've received a portion of the royalties ever since. Because they were honest, we didn't sue them for the whole thing. We just got a little piece of it, Albert Hammond said of the settlement. This story is ironic because, decades later, Radiohead themselves would accuse another artist, Lana Del Rey, of plagiarizing Creep.
This is my commitment, my modern manifesto.
Only to be reminded that Creep was partially stolen from someone else to begin with. The musical circle of life, indeed. Another famous 90s fight, Oasis versus Coca-Cola. Yes, the soda giant went to war with the bad boys of Britpop. It was over Oasis's song Shaker Maker, their second single, released in 1993. The original intro of Shaker Maker had the lines, "I'd like to teach the world to sing," in perfect harmony, which, lo and behold, are exactly the lyrics of Coca-Cola's classic 1970s jingle, "I'd like to teach the world to sing."
I like to teach the world to sing. Sing with me.
As performed by the New Seekers. Noel Gallagher, Oasis's chief songwriter, basically took the melody and some words from that famous Coke commercial and put them in the song, only later changing the lyrics. Coca-Cola didn't find this unauthorized tribute amusing. They sued Oasis for copyright infringement. The case ended with Oasis's label settling and paying about $500,000 in damages. Additionally, Oasis had to change the lyrics. They removed the borrowed lines in later pressings, replacing them with different words. Noel Gallagher quipped afterward, "Now we all drink Pepsi," a joking reference to the band switching sodas after having to pay up to Coca-Cola. Last but not least, we can't forget Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve, 1997, one of the most talked about plagiarism cases of the 90s. This track became a Britpop anthem with its sweeping string melody. However, that orchestral riff came from an arrangement of a Rolling Stones song. Here's what happened. The Verve sampled an instrumental version of The Last Time, a 1965 Stones song, performed by the Andrew Oldham Orchestra. They had a license to use a limited bit of it, but claiming the Verve used more than allowed, and that Bittersweet Symphony was essentially built on the Stones' composition. The Stones' former manager, Alan Klein, who controlled their 60s catalog via ABKCO, sued the Verve for plagiarism. The Verve ultimately lost. In late 1997, they settled, giving up 100% of the publishing rights of Bittersweet Symphony to ABKCO and adding Mick Jagger and Keith Richards as the song's official songwriters. In other words, the band forfeited basically everything from their biggest song. All royalties went to ABKCO/Stones for many years. The Verve's singer Richard Ashcroft bitterly remarked that it was the best song Jagger and Richards had written in 20 years, since they took credit without actually writing it. Thankfully, this story had a belated happy coda. In 2019, after more than 2 decades, Jagger and Richards relinquished their claim on Bittersweet Symphony, returning the rights and royalties to Ashcroft, acknowledging the song is his. But until that point, the Verve didn't see a penny from their biggest hit. This high-profile case shows how plagiarism issues can cost dearly, and how sometimes a poorly cleared sample can turn into a legal nightmare. As we've seen, behind many unforgettable hits, there may lie another song, and the line between genuine inspiration and outright plagiarism isn't always clear. Originality in music is a tricky thing. Artists inevitably take influence from one another, but some ended up taking a bit more than they should have. Whether it's a guitar riff from the 50s blues or a pop chorus from a soda commercial, when the truth comes out, even music's biggest names have had to face the music. Some claimed it was subconscious, others settled with money or shared credits. In the end, these stories make us wonder, is there really anything new under the sun? Are our favorite artists always brilliant originators? Or are they sometimes just great at recycling someone else's tunes? Each case is different. There are homages, coincidences, and also blatant copies. But after all this, we'll never hear certain classics the same way again, will we? The next time your favorite song plays, you might find yourself thinking, whose borrowed idea was that? So, which of these cases surprised you the most? Did you know these backstories? Leave a comment, and let's keep the conversation going about music's borrowed hits. Until next time.